Norman Martin, 6161 Ruth Drive. I'm just, you know, it's a little concerning not to see a resolution or know what the resolution is going to be this evening, other than a possible approval of the modification of the PUD. Is that correct? And as such, how are you going to address any of the issues that came before you from public input? You've not had time to research, you've not had time to lay a baseline figure or anything quantitative, whether it's odors or noise or fermentation or lighting or exhaust or CO2 emissions of anything of that nature. And I have a lot of difficulty with that. This is not the time to be quick on this, because I can't be assured the council will put that on there and if it's not discussed by you. So essentially, if you're taking a vote tonight, you're taking a vote just to push it through, then worry about putting the ornaments on the tree later. Am I wrong with that assessment?
I think with the time crunch that it's under, if it stops here tonight, that's the end of it altogether. If it goes on from tonight, you'll have to June 30th, plus or minus mainly, for council to address those concerns and ask those questions and get those answers. And with the way I see the time crunch, I don't see any other way. If anyone else, any other council members have input on that, am I wrong on that?
Mr. Chairman, you know, when you talk about design standards and lighting and things as such, this is a request for a preliminary plan approval. After following a preliminary plan approval, if it's approved, there is a process. They can't do anything. Developers can't proceed. They must file actually an application for a final approval. And that's at the point where our ordinance provides for the design standards to be reviewed, for all the things that we normally do on plans before they're developed. Landscaping, parking, you know, all of the details come in at that point. So how it's been treated throughout all of these developer applications for preliminary plans, it's been treated as a model of what's going to be there, what kind of uses are being planned, and general setback requirements as far as dimensions, etc. But all of the final details are supposed to come in on that final plan approval application. And the ordinance is set up that way.
Sure. I'd feel comfortable with that if there were some baseline already in place. If you're talking about a structure that's related to a commercial building, you have that defined. If you're talking about a residential building, you have that defined. If you have any other accessory usage, you have that defined. But this essentially is a light industrial usage, whether or not someone proposes it's agriculture. I've been in enough of these agricultural fights that are really industry to know that you have to have stipulations or others around suffer. And it's a wrong end of discussing this issue of not having any assurances that you would make a recommendation to move forward as a planning commission because of a timeline. I mean, can't you meet again? Can't you meet next week? Can't you meet tomorrow? I mean, it doesn't take long in the audience to be able to do research to determine that there's problems here. And you don't want to push someone, you know, a neighbor who's actually in favor of this facility. You don't want to push this on the other side if you can't assure that their health, safety, and welfare is going to be protected. I can't risk having something like this go on with the air being changed, with odors and et cetera that would occur, let alone what may occur outside the facility, what storage may occur, you know, other processing. So it's just not well thought out. Too many questions unanswered, and greatly, greatly concerned. More concerned than I've been at any other point in time related to any other PUD issues. And I just frankly would be disappointed if you move forward because of that. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have a question. I guess I should direct it to Chris Tobin. There was some discussion earlier today about whether the PUD currently reflected usage for agricultural or light industry. And I guess my question is, for a point of clarification, does the PUD have to be changed to reference agricultural or light industry, or is the document sufficient as it stands?
That's a good question. I had a question for Mr. Mason. That question was, when you indicated it was agricultural, my question was, is it also considered commercial? We don't have agricultural as one of the uses under our, well, it's 97902, permitted uses. And that's the question I have. I mean, that's because we have uses that are specified in the ordinance, as you know, and agricultural is not one of them, industrial is not one of them.
Right.
If we wanted to allow it, you're absolutely right. If that's what the use is, then it would, my opinion, would have to be amended. If it's commercial, it would not have to be amended.
So how do we determine that?
I think the developer needs to explain perhaps a little more in detail the use, and we need to make that determination
Okay.
here at the
All right.
Planning Commission and with the help.
Well, we haven't had a working session, so there's a lot of stuff that I guess I'm really curious about, and it starts with zoning. So, right, the PUD is not written to allow necessarily agriculture or industrial. Maybe it's part commercial. Now, whether being part commercial is enough to get everything else in and permissible under the ordinance, I don't know. And I don't know if we need an opinion from the zoning board, whether we need whether the PUD should just be amended, or whether the PUD allows for additional, I think the language is like ancillary or complementary uses that would be sufficient under the circumstances to permit this type of facility to go forward. But I don't have the answers to those questions. I don't make those decisions. Do we have anybody who could provide more insight into whether, with more certainty, whether the planned development for both cultivation, which I think could be considered agricultural, and I think also maybe people are latching onto the industrial or light industrial because of the processing, whether that will satisfy the zoning requirements under the PUD.
Well, as I understand the PUD, it permits all those kind of uses that it's opened the door to all commercial uses, all kinds of different uses. It's just for the council to decide whether you want to use it or not. If you don't, just say no, and we'll go away.
Well, our job.
But if you do, no, but I'm saying if you do, well, then you got to expand your vision a little bit, because you're not going to find a cultivation facility coming here again. This is a one-time show, and you're not going to have a processing facility probably coming here again. But you've got to think about, is this a commercial establishment? Is this a commercial business of sorts? I think it is. Certainly the growing part is agricultural, but it's commercial. I think it fits within the zoning requirements that has been laid out already. If we never thought that it was possible, I would have never come here. Every conversation I've had with any city official, it was that this was a permitted use. If you thought it was, if you wanted to do this. If you don't, that's a different story, and I understand that.
Well,